Welcome, everybody. If you're here for the ABCs of opticianry, you're in the right place. We're going to talk about fitting and dispensing. And no, don't hang up. That's not what we're here for. We're here to talk about being on multiple boards and the conflicts of interest and issues that you might run into. What I wanted to let you know is we are not going to have slides. We're not trying to do a presentation. This is not about trying to have you watch a boring discussion. This is an interactive. So Curt and I are here to talk to you about how to handle being on multiple boards. For those that don't know, my name is Jim Morris. I am an attorney, or as Curt likes to say, a liar. I keep telling them there's a W in there, and it's a lawyer. We're very, very closely tied to being a liar, but we like to say lawyer. So, with that said, I want to make sure I tell you a little bit about what I do and why they asked me to be here, and then I'm going to let Curt say a little bit about himself and why he's here. I am an attorney, but with regard to this group, I am Executive Director and General Counsel for ABO and NCLE. So I handle the certification exams that most of you have taken. We work with OAA, NAO, CLSA, NFOS, COA, any other alphabet soup you can think of in opticianry. So in that role, I have to constantly be talking to my board, ABO NCLE board, and others about the conflicts of interest that may exist and how do we handle the conflicts? How do we go about addressing concerns about being on different boards? What information can you share? What information do you not share? So that's where we are, and that's who I am. That's why I'm here. So Curt, why don't you tell them a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm Curt Duff. For those that don't know me, I started out with Society of Dispensing Opticians of Kentucky somewhere in the late 60s. I was on the board in the 70s. I was president. I then got on the board of OAA. Went from the OAA to NCLE and back to the OAA board, and then became president. And after serving my presidency, I moved back to the ABO NCLE board. So I've kind of been on a state level. I have been on two boards at the same time before, and I've been on different boards. So I have experienced most of the things that Jim just talked about. So I will tell you this, I've probably been on a board getting up over 40 years consecutively. So I will say this to those who are thinking about going to a board or getting on a board. You serve your board that you're on. You don't forget where you came from, but you remember where you are. And I will tell you that I will do for state societies from ABO as anything that I can do. But my first priority will be to ABO because that's the board I'm on. And if we both thrive, then that's great. Okay. But my first loyalty right now will be to protect the ABO and make sure they're doing right. And generally speaking, when you do that, it's best for everybody. But recognize a conflict, and if you have one, abstain yourself out of it. But serve the board you're on. Jim?
So I've got a couple of things with that I wanted to let everybody know. Being the attorney in the room and being the one that has to address these things, I have been in this situation myself, and I'm going to go through that here in just a second to give you a little bit more information. But I want to give an example about ABO NCLE. For those that don't know, ABO NCLE used to be two boards. We met together by agreement, but we were the American Board of Opticianry, Inc. Then we were also the National Contact Lens Examiners, Inc. And I've been involved for 10 years now. Last month was my 10-year anniversary of being involved with ABO and CLE. Before I got there, when the board met, this was bizarre to me, but I still have the tape recorder. They literally had a recording device they brought in a court reporter to the meeting who sat there and transcribed everything because nobody could trust anybody and everyone was fighting with one another. We've come a really long way since then, but there were discussions when I first came on about the fact that OAA can't do things. People who are appointed by OAA, and just so you know, the way the ABO and CLE board works, people are appointed to the board by 4 different organizations. Or Contact Lens, used to be Contact Lens Society of America, and we're working that out. OAA, NFOS, and NAO. So National Academy, OAA, the National Federation of Opticianry Schools, and the Contact Lens Society of America. When I first came on board, there were discussions about how nobody would do anything because nobody else was allowed to do anything. Meaning, OAA is not going to support anything for NAO to do. NAO is not going to support OAA. And everybody was doing this. Everybody was fighting with one another. Money couldn't be spent. Money couldn't be shared because, well, I'm not going to do anything for them because we don't want them to succeed. We want to be the ones that are doing whatever it was. We now have a completely different mindset, but Mr. Duff was one of the reasons why that mindset changed, along with Tom Barakato and Dave Meldrum and several others that have been on a lot of these boards for a long time. There became a discussion about the need to allow everybody to grow at the same time. So we had to tell our board, when you walk in the door, and this is one of the first things I did, when you walk in this door, you take off your OAA hat because you work for ABO and CLE. You take off your NAO hat because you work for ABO and CLE. And, you know, Curt, I'd like you to talk a little bit because Curt, back in the day when we were going through this, I suggested that the two organizations merge, ABO and NCLE. And Curt Duff was the head of ABO at the time, and Tom Barakato was, it was first Tom and then Mark Clore, but he was on the contact lens side. And Curt, when I suggested that they merge and you were appointed to the opticianry side, in 3 words or less, without cussing, tell the people in attendance what your response was.
My response was no, because I wanted to protect the ABO because they have the most money, and I didn't want spectacle fitters' money going to support the NCLE, and I also didn't like some of the other things they were doing, so I said no.
All right, so Curt says no. Interesting little thing happened, though, because Curt went off the ABO board, but then was appointed to the NCLE board. So, Curt, tell them what happened when I suggested that ABO and NCLE merge.
Well, as an NCLE member, I suggested that we do that because it was beneficial to the NCLE that didn't have enough money. But there were also underlying causes because the way they were doing it before, they were going to, Mark wanted to give NAO some more seats so they would be equal with OAA. And I said, hell no. And OAA started these 2 organizations, and they were set up that way by people that thought it was fair then. We've added seats, but we add them equally. We don't take away from one and give to the other. But when that died, and I was on the NCLE side, the NCLE probably does not make enough money to do the things that need to be done for opticians and contact lenses. So the beneficial would be beneficial to both if we were there. Before we did a 70-30 split, in case you don't know what that is, if we had a bill from somebody that was supplying something for us, we would charge ABO 70% and NCLE 30. And you had two sets of books. You had two different IRS things you had to do. So now they're all combined in one. So to make it more efficient. And also, as Jim said, the complexity of the board changed. There was a willingness to work together from the organizations. And a lot of that was Dave Milgram, and I respect him for that, because when he was chair, even as this was starting, he said, my goal is to make everything equal for all of us, and not who gets the most and who does that. And I agreed with him. I said, this would be the best thing we could do for opticians, and have always felt that way. I did not serve on the NCSORE board, but I was on their panel and reviewed tests and things. And one of their big supporters was Granville Smith, who's been a friend of mine since since I got into this business. And he and I are still friends, and we talk. And when people come up to us and says, well, yeah, Duff, you're ABO and he's NCSORB. I said, no, he's a friend, and we will do what's best for opticians regardless of what board we're on. And I think if you keep that in mind, okay, rather than not what's particularly good for state societies, but what's also good for independent opticians, and protect your board, you will do your due diligence to be where you need to be and where opticians need to be. And Jim, I would like you to talk a little bit about the finance end of this, your responsibility as a board member, in case you catch somebody doing something they shouldn't do. Okay.
Yeah, well, we've got a few things that we're going to cover today beyond this. And Arlen, I got your question on the chat and in the Q&A, and we're going to get to that here in a minute so that Curt knows what that is. The question that was asked was about trying to expand into other states. We were asked to handle the conflicts of interest issue and how to be on multiple boards, but I am going to cover that if we get some time. And I will cover your fiduciary responsibilities that Curt just mentioned as well. I wanted to share with you the reason why I had Curt talk about his role and how he switched wasn't to pick on him. I told him yesterday I was going to do that. The reason for that being important was the understanding that at the time we served two different boards. We were the American Board of Opticianry, and Curt was the head of that, protecting opticians and the money that he was in charge of fiduciarily. Then when he switched and he's on the NCLE side, his whole approach changed. And he was like, well, yeah, we need to combine. We need to be part of it. And the reason was the board that he served, his master, so to speak, changed. He's now answering for contact lens, and his job is to protect contact lenses. And I wanted to share that because that is, in a nutshell, what you have to be careful of and what you have to do when you're on these boards. Same thing goes for, I'm going to throw in another individual here, Tom Barakato. Tom Barakato was past president of OAA. He served on the ABO NCLE board. He serves on the Ohio licensing board. In those roles, I have watched him take off a hat and put on a different hat all the time. Meaning that there are times where his passion is on behalf of the Ohio opticians. There are times his passion is on behalf of the Ohio consumers of opticianry because he's acting on behalf of the board. And then there are times that his passion is ABO NCLE exams and he's not answering to the Ohio. So you always have to remember which board you're serving with, which information you are providing, and how you're handling things. And that's critical if you go through if you're going through trying to figure out what your role is. You always have to think of that. One other thing on the conflict side. I'm an attorney, so I deal with this all the time. But in this field, I have dealt with this recently. I have been working for 2 different organizations at the same time, ABO and a different one. And I literally had to have, and Curt Duff signed it, I had to have a conflict of interest waiver signed by both entities that I was working with, because both entities had to understand that there may be times where I'm doing things for one organization that may not benefit the other organization. If you're serving on multiple boards, as Curt said, you're going to have to do some things. One, you're going to have to remember which hat you're wearing at which time and which constituency you're protecting at which time. Meaning which, like Mr. Barakato with, being a protector of the consumers in Ohio while he's on the licensing board. He's not there to protect opticians. Now, he's there to protect the profession of opticianry, but he's there to protect the consumers from unethical, unlicensed opticians. Then when he's on our board, ABO and CLE, his job is to advocate on behalf of contact lens and opticianry, the exams, continuing education. He always has to remember which hat he's wearing. You have to do the same thing. And at the end of the day, either you have to have a conflict waiver if you have a conflict, or like Curt said, if there's a decision that comes up, and I've seen this many times with speakers on the ABO and CLE board, where a speaker will say, you know what, there's a possibility I may benefit from this. So I'm going to throw somebody out there. I don't know if he's on or not, but B.W. Phillips has abstained from any discussion regarding, and he's the chair of education, but he has abstained from discussions regarding speakers because he's a speaker. And he says, I can't vote on that because I might benefit from that. So we record abstentions all the time on our board. That's the other thing you need to do. At any point in time, you're doing something that you personally can benefit from on any of these boards that you serve on. Always abstain from voting on something that you could then personally benefit, or someone may think that you personally benefit, because that is when you get into trouble. And that leads into what Curt was talking about. So I came on ABO and CLE 10 years ago. I came on as an attorney, and I came on to do an investigation because the board had a fiduciary responsibility and had a report of, at the time, sexual harassment. And it turned out it wasn't sexual harassment. It was somebody who was angry because she was no longer allowed to steal. And there were 2 people that did a really great job of stealing. But the board stepped up as soon as there was any hint of impropriety and asked an attorney, me, to do an investigation. And in that role, the board took on a fiduciary obligation to monitor you always take on a fiduciary obligation to monitor the financial aspect of the business that you are involved in, whether it's a state society, whether it's a national, whether it's a regional. If you're on a board, you have an absolute obligation to fulfill your duties, to make sure that there's no illegal activity going on, that there's no fraud, that there's no financial impropriety, that there's no ethical or discriminatory as well. You're required under state and federal law to protect against those types of things if you're running a nonprofit especially. There are some issues with regard to how you go about doing that, how often you do reviews and audits and things like that of financial. And it kind of depends on the size and the strength of the organization that you're involved in. But at all times that you're on one of these boards, it's your obligation to make sure that the board's being run properly, because you have what's called a fiduciary obligation to the membership of whatever that board is. So ABO and CLE, that's all the contact lens and opticianry and education, certification, licensing, and so on. If you're on the state association, those are all the people that have agreed to be part of your state association. But regardless of what you're doing, you have an ethical and fiduciary obligation to all those people that are on those boards. And so always keep that in mind. Always look into how things are being run. If it's not being run properly, step in, address it. Now, one of the things that's happened with one of the groups that I've been involved in was there was a threat made against an organization that they, being the board members, were personally liable for all of the activities being taken and all of the debt being incurred. If you're a nonprofit, if you serve on a nonprofit board and that board is actually doing its job, meaning it's actually established with with a federal employer identification number, or it's filed with the state, and you're going through the appropriate channels and steps, then you're not going to be individually liable unless you are allowing things to go forward. So, for example, the person that stole from ABO and NCLE, the two people, they were personally liable. And I personally prosecuted, and I personally assisted in getting one of them sentenced to 4 10-year sentences and one sentenced to 3 10-year sentences. And so we literally go after people. If you're stealing, you're going to get caught. If you're not stealing and you're doing your job and you're doing the best you can, you've done due diligence, you're handling things, then you're not going to be personally liable. So that's the other thing. Serving on a board like this is important, and so the law sets up some parameters to protect people doing good on a board like that. So, Curt, we do have Arlen's question that I want to get to, and I want to make sure we've got about 20 minutes left, but I don't want to jump over, and I want to give you an opportunity to address or ask any questions that you just saw or heard or want to address.
One of the things that when we were going through that with those people that took money, the IRS people didn't care that we didn't know it was happening. They told us that it was our responsibility to know what was going on with the board. And we did a good job of recovering, thanks to Jim. I think we recovered most of the money that they took, and those people were penalized for breaking the law. But it was a little scary when, you say, well, we didn't know they was doing that. And they looked at us and said, we don't care you didn't know. It was your responsibility to know. And of course, doing it right and going through and the things that you're supposed to do the way we did it with Jim, that was the last I heard. But that was a pretty scary statement when the IRS looks at you and says that. And they say, I don't care that you didn't know. You should have known. Well, we started telling them why we didn't know. They really didn't care, and there were reasons we didn't know, and good reasons we didn't know. But and I don't want to go into them because we don't have enough time, but I'll be glad to talk with anyone that wants to talk to me about it. I will tell you that I was one scared dude, and, I was thinking, God, how did we let this happen? And we did, because we didn't. I remember statements that were made, and we all made it. Good people, and because we trusted somebody we should not have. So, yeah, it's good to have trust. It's good to have friends and to like people, but you got a job to do, and you should be doing it. And audits do not catch people stealing. Audits tell you how to keep people from stealing, to make it more difficult. And that's what the audit does. So an audit is not the answer, but it certainly will help you keep it from happening again. That's the reason when they look at me and they say, let's do a review, and I look at your balance in your bank and you got money, and I say no, because the review doesn't tell you anything. It really doesn't.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot to that. The thing I want to make sure I don't want to scare anybody into serving on a board because of the issue that we had. We just want you to understand that because our role here was to talk to you about serving on boards and your responsibility and so on. I do have some answers for a couple of these questions, and then Curt, you have one rolling there, but I'm going to answer Arlen's right now. So those that don't see the question and answer, Arlen has a question on there, and he says, is there a boilerplate conflict of interest form that has been used? The answer is yes. I've got one that I use for our board. I've got one that I've used for a couple of the other boards here. And they're different. You have
Yeah,
to
well, you
tweak
better
them.
have 30 minutes to read it.
No, I'm talking about the short form. Whenever we've had somebody
You
work
don't
on
do the
our
short form, Jim.
So, but the thing is, you have to tweak it. That's what Curt's talking about. I've got a conflict of interest for people who are on my board that is much more strenuous, that you have to fill out all of your monies that you make off of opticianry that are between any of the appointing organizations and things like that. But then we have a short form we use for people that are involved with our exam. And what I'm going to try to do, and I'm not sure how they're going to do it in this meeting, but I'm going to put together a conflict of interest packet and ask Chris how we can get that out to those that are interested. I'm assuming that there's going to be some ability to share information after this. So Arlen, I'll get that out to everybody once I've got that in place. So there's another question on here. There's a couple of them I'm going to roll down through. Ben Lowry, how do I join the OAK? You want to give them you don't get to plug OAK for everybody else. That's Opticians Association of Kentucky. You have
Well, it's an excellent organization, I will tell you. It ranks right up there with Michigan and Ohio. I'll just plug everybody else, but actually, most of us, and Kentucky does, have a website, and you just go to it and click join, and that's the way we do it, and that's the way most all organizations do it nowadays. I can't believe I've been in this house as long as I've been in for the last year and the last month, but I have learned a lot about Zoom, but that's another subject for another day. But thank you.
So just so everybody knows, there's your Opticians Kentucky website. There's your shameless plug, Curt. All right, Tom, we're going to get to yours here in a second. I want to make sure that we answer some of the others that are on here. Tom Hicks, I'm going to get to yours and Arlen's other one. Give me just a second. So question was asked, Wesley asked, is someone coming up in the ranks? I believe we definitely need to know how that happens so that we make sure it never happens to us. Okay, I think what you're talking about is how did we get caught or how did we get in trouble and how did we catch them? So what happened was, and I'm not going to give you the full, and Wesley, at some point, I see you all the time, so I can sit down and tell you the whole story sometime. In a nutshell, this is what happened. There was a perfect storm with ABO and CLE because you had an executive director that's supposed to be monitored by a chief financial officer. Well, the chief financial officer realized that the executive director was stealing. And he was stealing using his credit card. So the chief financial officer sent him some, and I'm the one that uncovered all of these deleted emails, rebuilt, chased it down. So if you really want to know, it's like a book. But she threatened him unless he paid her extra money every month. And then if he paid her extra money every month, she would figure out a way to make the Best Buy purchases and the Cabela's hunting purchases and other things. She would make them look like legitimate expenses. So he agreed, started paying her. He had a relationship with her, which is where the sexual harassment came in. He broke off the relationship with her. Then she started extorting him for more money, or else she was going to tell spouses and so on. And basically, she started stealing 10 times as much as he was stealing because he was so afraid she was going to turn him in that he wasn't watching what she was doing. She started fabricating checks, issuing chargebacks to her credit card, issuing renewals without running them through the system, but just putting them in her bank account. Then we had reviews done, and the problem was, and audits. And the problem was that the reviewer and the auditor relied on the CFO for the documentation, and the CFO literally fabricated invoices to make it look like legitimate purchases. So to let you know, that's the 3-minute version. To let you know what we did in response to that: 1, we got them both sentenced to prison. 2, I forced them into bankruptcy, got their houses, put that money into ABO NCLE. 3, they're still paying to this day all of the money that they've stolen once they're getting out of jail. One of them works at a T-shirt shop. The other's still in jail. Then number 4, we went after the auditors because the auditors didn't catch what they should have caught. And I went after insurance because we had directors and officers insurance. So we went full scale after everybody that we could and chased every penny that we could all the way to the end. How do you make sure you don't get caught? First of all, you need to just make sure that you're actually monitoring. And I've told people this before. The problem is that you all are subject matter experts in what you're awesome at, which is being an optician, being a contact lens fitter. You're awesome at it, but you're not awesome at being an accountant, an auditor, an attorney, an investigator, or trying to figure out fraud. That's not your job. So when we were asked by the Washington Post back when this hit the news why we were being, why people stole from us and why we didn't catch it, I was the one who spoke, and I was the one who defended my board. And my comment to them was, my board did its job. It hired auditors. It had a CFO. It had checks and balances. But if somebody's going to steal, they may be able to steal anyway. But we got out of that pretty well unscathed, but we did so because of the fact that we had these steps in place. So you should be looking at reviews. If you're running a state association, you may not be able to afford a full audit, but you need to have an independent review. OAA, NAO, CLSA, ABO, NCLE. I will tell you, since I took over, we have had audits every year. Because when I took over, I said, I will not run the organization without an audit every year, because I don't want threats against me that I've done something wrong. So I required an audit every year for 10 straight years. So you need to start looking into things like that. That's how you can protect yourself. So due diligence, I'm going to jump on that because I see it. You have a balance back and forth, Arlen, about the question was, how do you perform due diligence? How do you know where that balance is because of the CPA every year? We literally just got that discussion going with ABO and CLE because we've now gone through, because we had a couple of short audits. I think it's 12 straight clean audits, which is the highest level of audit we can have. And the question was asked during our recent board meeting, is it time for us to stop spending the money? Because for an organization our size, it's $30,000 a year that we're spending on an audit every single year. And we're not getting any guidance on fixing things because we're clean every year. So there's talk about, at what point is there a cost benefit breakdown that we need to fix? You ought to be looking into that. My recommendation has been that you should have an audit done every 3 years. If you're small, you should try to see if you can find somebody to do it at a discount or free pro bono because you're a nonprofit. You should have a review done, but you need to make sure you're doing independent because the person that's running it, they may be your best friend. Mike Roby, I'm sorry. Well, it doesn't matter. It's public record. Mike Roby was a good friend of a lot of people in the opticianry field. And no one thought that he was stealing, and yet he was. All right, Curt, we're running out of time, so I'm going to try to answer some of these. Who on the board can require an expense report? Everyone. Everyone on the board should be able to ask for an expense report or an explanation of expenses. Every single person without fail. The way I have done that on my board is, if you want to know, I give it to you. If you serve, now there are certain things confidentially that I can't share with the rank and file certificate, ABO certificate. They're confidential records and so on. But we publish things on the website. You all can go to something called guidestar.com and you can see all of the finances for any nonprofit that exists. You can look into their background. You can investigate those types of things. I think I answered Doug Pelkey's with the audit done. I think that the audit should be done every couple to 3 years. You should have financial information in your hands at every board meeting. Members should be aware of what's going on throughout the time period. Curt, feel free to jump in and answer these. I'm trying to quick answer them unless you want me to keep going.
Well, I kind of like what you're saying. I do want to say I'm one of the ones that push for an audit every year because I personally went through the pain and agony of sending people to prison, and that's not a good thing. And you know, for something, and I know we've had clean audits, but it may be time to change who's doing the audits rather than not do them. So I think ABO will probably continue, if my opinion.
Let me jump. Two of them are kind of together here. Curt, and this one would be for you, and I'm going to ask them both back to back because we are running out of time. Actually, there's three. So think of all three of these together. One, any suggestions for drawing interest for opticians to join state boards? Two, for new opticians seeking to get involved and served, do the boards have organizational charts available where newcomers can see the ranks and responsibilities? And three, I've been an optician for 4 years. I'm interested in being on the board in the future. What steps should I take in my career to be a qualified candidate? Is management a requirement for experience? You want me to answer these quickly or you? Management is not a requirement. I will say that.
No, it's not. And the newest board member we got is Evan Cassidy, and he actually came to leadership, and following leadership as an apprentice, as he got his license, he put himself on the ballot, and we encouraged him because he's a good IT man too. So he had qualifications that helped our board. And on the state society, the board works. And I'm not saying on national you don't work, but we actually run our meetings. So you pay a little attention to that. It's hard to get new recruits because there's people out there that just want to come to the meeting and leave. But I don't know, Jim, I leave that to you. How you know, I've not done a real good job with it in Kentucky, but we have rotated. We've probably had 20 or 30 different people on the board since I've been there, but so we could do better.
Let me jump in there and say we've had on ABO NCLE some retreads, as I call them, people that come back on for whatever reason, and a lot of times that's important. But we also started an effort to try to get new people. And what I've been telling people is this: you want to be on the ABO NCLE board, you've got to become active in OAA, NAO, or CLSA. If you want to be on the CLSA board, the OAA, or the NAO, you go through your state societies first, and you establish yourself there. If you're a student, get into the OAA Student to Leadership program and start, doing that. It's amazing because there's a person who literally started the student position on the board with OAA. Literally said, "Hey, you need me," and then they started it. So basically what you need to do is you need to get active by reaching out to people. If you're in Kentucky, reach out to Curt. If you're in Ohio, you go to the Ohio board and you say, "Hey, I'm really interested. I really have some time here that I'd like to." Yeah, Arlen just made a comment that's great. It says, if you want to get involved, you don't wait. You reach out. You be active. Reach out and say, "Hey, I would like to do this, because I can tell you when that happened with the student on the board, OAA had no clue that that was something that they should do. And it was one of the very best things OAA ever did, was putting a student representative on their board. Because what did that do? He's now moved into a regular position on the board. He's become very active. And then we've had more people behind them that have come on, and they've then stayed active. It guarantees, if you have that type of involvement and you're pushing for it, it guarantees ongoing, refreshed ideas, newer people, more young participation. So get involved, contact who you need to. To get on the ABO NCLE takes a little time. You have to go through and literally start out with the state associations, start out with the OAA, NAO, CLSA, NFOS, start out ground level. But you know, the other thing is this. I'm going to say this because you all need to know this, and we are running out of time. You need to protect your profession. The best way to protect your profession is to be passionate about it, believe in your profession, and find a way to move it forward. Go to your state. Create a new state society. Contact Iowa if you want to know how to do that, because they built one from the ground up and it's doing great. If you want to know how one runs in a licensed state, Connecticut too. Yeah, there's brand new in Connecticut. There's all kinds of, you can literally go to people who have already done this and ask them, how do we do this? And, or go to anybody on OAA, go to anybody on ABO. We all want to help. We all need the help, and we all need to expand. So if Jim, I can just leave you with
one thing I want to say before you leave is you don't have to be on the board to serve. Every organization has committees. Get on a committee, show them that you have the passion and that you want to work, and they'll find you if you get on there and show them that you'll do it. But committees, to me, is the answer to how somebody wants to serve, because that's where the grassroots and the nuts and bolts and the work is done, is in committee.
All right. I think that's it, because I've been told we're out of time.